Y'all, my name is Danelia DJ, and welcome to a space where purpose, love, and unity thrive. We are breaking barriers between the religious and the rejected. This is Between Me and Thee.
Hey y'all, this is Between Me and Thee. I'm your host, Danelia DJ, and this is a space where faith is alive, love is loud, and purpose is powerful. Let's get right into it. Our song of the week is People by Jonathan McReynolds. Y'all, this is a powerful, reflective, and freeing type of song. So if you have never listened to it, please make sure you do go and listen to that. If you've listened to it before, please make sure you go and listen to it again. You will not regret it. Thank me later, actually. Our scripture is coming from Colossians 4:5-6, and I'll be reading from the NLT version. It says, "Live wisely among those who are not believers and make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be gracious and attractive so that you will have the right response for everyone." So let's talk about how many of us may have grown up in church, right? Been introduced to God in some type of space that was church related, Christian related, all of these things. Or if you didn't grow up in church, you were still introduced to God, because although not everyone actually attends church, there are many households, families, and people who introduce God to their families and their children, right? Who don't actually attend a regular service or attend church service at all. Right? And so maybe you were still introduced to God. Or maybe you were not introduced to God. You never grew up knowing who God was. You never heard of God. And you grew up and you were like, these people keep on talking about this God who is this, right? And so maybe you ran into some people who actually misrepresented the character of God. They misrepresented who God actually is, right? Whatever category you may fit into, maybe you walked away and you decided this was too much. Right? Some of us may have walked away because along the walk and along the journey of discovering who God is and wanting to be more like Christ and wanting to live a life that is pleasing to God, you found out like it's kind of hard to try to be like God and stuff when we encounter or we are living in a world full of people who want nothing to do with God, right? We're encountering people daily, and these people can be in your church, these people can be in your family, these can be co-workers, these can be people you just meet in passing by. These could be people serving your food, fast food restaurants, whatever the case may be. These can be people you run into in the grocery store. And if I slow down, right, I'll get all the words out. But these can be people that you run into in the grocery store. It could be people anywhere. And you found it hard to be able to spread the gospel, talk about God, give the good news, and love other people. Love the people and the truth. Maybe you can't find the balance and you're like, I can't do this because this is too much and I'm pretty sure it's not supposed to be like this, right? Well, if you are one of those people, maybe you ask the question that I've asked before. Is it possible to fully follow God? Fully and actually and truly seek and serve the Lord, right? And still be present with people who don't? Is it possible to exist in a world with people who don't actually care about God, seek God, serve God, love God, right? And still truly and fully serve, follow, and live for God? Well, here's the thing about that. The reason we ask that question generally is because we haven't been taught the difference between balance and compromise. We're always taught, that you're in or you're out. It's one way or the other. And this is true. This is true. However, people tend to forget to give the information or the advice or the teaching or the knowledge, right? All of those words. People tend to forget to teach people how you stay a part of God's kingdom and how you don't compromise, right? But how you find the balance in loving others without compromising or stepping down to where they are and getting them to step up to where you are. People don't teach that enough, right? People aren't being made aware. I feel like for a good portion of my life, I didn't know how to do that. I have people all around me who are like not always seeking God, or I'm not just generally surrounded by people who are seeking God or living a life, right? I have family members, friends, co-workers, right? I feel like I'm a person that I generally attract people who are not living a life pleasing to God, like people who aren't always trying to live a life, or people who don't know God, and that's not to say like I know God better than them. No, there are just some people who just haven't been introduced to God, or who had one concept, one perspective, and they never sought God for themselves, or maybe they sought God for themselves, but it just didn't go the way that they planned. I feel like those type of people always find me. Okay. And so maybe you are like me and you feel like those type of people always find you. And so you find it hard to continue on your journey, and you feel like you don't fully know. How do I love people, God, the way that you want me to love them? How do I convey your message and your word to them, Lord, and fully serve you and not fall into the area of compromise? Well, as we consider the song People by Jonathan McReynolds. So if you haven't listened to it, you might want to pause so you can go hear what he said before I get to this point that I'm getting to, right? But as we consider the song by Jonathan McReynolds, he's talking about real people. He's not talking about perfect people. He's not talking about perfect people. He's talking about real people. Okay? He's talking about people who may hurt us, people who confuse us, people who disappoint us, right? And how these are all still people that God loves. These people are still important. These people still matter to God, right? And so sometimes we encounter people who hurt us, who disappoint us, who lead us astray, cast us aside along the way, okay? And even though we may feel like these people did these things, or we may even feel bad for people, or we may desire things for people, right? And they don't desire it for themselves, and we can't help them, or they choose to still do things and still live a life that they want to live that is just like detrimental to them, dangerous, all the things. And we are just like, I just cannot be involved. Like, I have nothing to do with you, and we just cut people off, right? Which is something, not proud of it, but it's something I tend to do. And it's because sometimes it's easier to just cut people off when they don't fit in what you think it looks like or it should look like, right? Or when they are not fitting in the way that you think, how you think they should be moving, how you think they should be operating in their walk, how you think their journey should look. And maybe they're not getting in line with what you envision for their journey, right? And so it's easier to just cut people off. Well, here's my favorite part of People by Jonathan. When he says, forgive me when I'm one of those people. Because here's the thing, we have all been one of these people at some point in our lives. Now, whether we're willing to admit that or not is the real question. But we have all been one of these people who have either hurt, confused, disappointed someone else, right? Or even experienced it, or both, right? We have all been one of these people at some point in our lives. And so even when we are looking at other people and we feel like, I can't love you because you're not willing to change your life and give your life over to Christ. Well, here's the thing. We can still love people. It does not mean that we are lowering our standards. And extending grace is not the absence of truth. This is actually us leaning into finding the balance, right? Which means we are walking in the confidence of who God called us to be and who we are in God, right? Even in spaces that are not always God inclusive, loud about God, or even concerned about God, right? Because like I said, this is everyday spaces that we walk in that aren't concerned about God, aren't loud about God, don't care about God. We go into spaces all the time, every day. Okay, if you go into a restaurant, you don't know if those people are serving the Lord. You don't know if those people care about God. And generally, you don't know when you first walk in, but generally you find out. You'll find out a few sentences in, a few words in, you'll find out who's living for the Lord, who's not, okay? But you're not walking into spaces where everyone is living for God and everyone cares about God and everyone is just has God at the front of their life. We're not always walking in those spaces. Sometimes we go to jobs day in and day out in spaces where God is not inclusive. And in the world that we live in, it is a world that is adamant about not including God. We live in a world who wants to mention God, but not the true one and living God, right? People want to mention God, but they're not talking about the God who gave his son for our sins, right? They're talking about all these other gods, right? All these other things that they're worshiping, all these other idols. Then you even have people who are calling themselves God, right? So we're not always walking in God inclusive places that are loud about God. And I'm talking about the one and only God. Okay. We're not always in places that are concerned about God, concerned about his word, his son, his will, right? And so we have to learn to find the balance in loving people through this, right? Not compromising, but loving people through this. And so as we find the balance, or we learn to find the balance, that doesn't mean that we are silent about God. No, it means that we are still walking in who God called us to be, being who God called us to be. And we are loud about God in our confidence in who we are in God, right? It means that we can go into a room knowing who God has called us to be, knowing who God is, knowing who he has called us, who he's called us to be and what he's called us to do, right? Without feeling the need to be overpowering, overbearing in that room, right? It means that we can walk in these rooms and we don't have to feel like we have to be the star of the show, okay? But we also don't have to feel like we have to dim our light. Okay, it actually affirms our security in God, especially when we know who we are in God. Our relationship to God affirms our security in God, right? And so once we know who we are, once we know who God has called us to be, once we know who the Father is and what he requires of us and what we should be doing in this life, we already have the security with us. Okay. And it means we are already going to be having this thing about us, right? Because our life reflects it, right? And it's not that we're trying to show off for people or I got to show you that I know God. It's not about that. It's about the fact that when you are in relationship with God, your life reflects it, right? And your life can become the billboard before you even say anything. And so when you walk in these rooms that are not God inclusive because of who you are, people begin to flock towards you because they can see your light and they want to know what this light is. They want to know what has you so happy, what it gives you this joy. And the thing about that is you can be smiling, you can be joyful, you can be just giving the most happiest thing they ever seen coming through the place, right? And they may not even know that you may be dealing with your own things. You may be dealing with your own storms and battles, right? I'll give you an example. I am a person, I work in childcare, and every day that I am at this job, even when it's a rough day, sometimes a bad day, I am a high energy, bubbly type of person, right? People could like to call me animated, okay? Because I just truly love when other people are happy. I love making others happy. I love just exuding joy, right? I love being joyful. I love having good conversations, making others laugh, enjoy the day. And even if the day is rough for me, I just feel like it doesn't have to be rough for everybody, right? And people, anywhere that I've worked, anywhere that I am, anybody that I've come in contact with and had conversations with, people generally know this about me. Well, at my job, y'all, the job that I work in, I'm generally asked the question, what are you on? Like, why do you have so much joy? Like, I'm a loud person. I don't know, maybe one day it'll dial down, but I'm a loud person. And so I'm just full of energy. And it is truly the joy of the Lord. It is truly the joy of the Lord, y'all. I drink coffee, but not always. And I don't even drink coffee to like stay awake or have energy. And, I don't drink energy drinks often. So it's really never like, I don't have to really explain that, but it's truly the joy of the Lord. When I walk into that building, I'm covered because I pray for the Lord to be able to give me strength, to cover me, to keep me, to help me to make the most out of the days and, have a great day. And I pray over the people that I work with, right? But because of my relationship with God, I am able to have the joy of the Lord and walk in a place that makes them think I have to be on something to walk in there as happy and as excited as I am. Because here's the thing, though I truly like what I do, I truly love what I do, I am in a field that I wanted to be in. It is not my dream or my goals, right? Or my ultimate goal. But it is a place that I enjoy working at, y'all. But childcare is not an easy setting to work in. Anybody who is in childcare or has ever been can tell you that. Anything related to education or teaching, stewarding over other people's kids, is not an easy task. So it's always so shocking to others when I walk in or when I'm at work and I'm just full of energy. But I am full of that energy because I have the joy of the Lord down on the inside of me. And when I go in and I exude this joy, I get to have conversations with people. And a lot of times, any job that I've been at, any place that I've been at, and I have these conversations with people, I encounter people who either stopped going to church, never went to church, grew up going to church but didn't go as an adult, or people who are like, I want to go to church. I want to know God. I always encounter at least one person at any place I'm at, any job I've been at, any event, any facility, wherever I'm at. I always encounter at least one person who feels so comfortable coming to me and talking to me about it. But here's the thing about that as well, right? It's not only because I exude joy. It's because I carry God with me everywhere I go. Okay? I work in education, y'all. And one of the biggest things about education is they don't want you to talk about God. They took prayer out of schools. They don't want you to talk about God. Well, here's my thing. I've never been ashamed of who my God is and talking about my God. Okay? And I'm not like asking for repercussions, but I'm also not denying God. Okay? So wherever I'm at, I don't push my faith on anybody else. I don't try to force anybody or enforce anything on anyone. I'm not trying to weaponize scripture. I am simply exuding the life that I live at home in the public. And so when people ask me, I do tell them, that I pray, that I read my word, that I go to church, that this is the life that I live, that this is the God that I believe in. That if you want better, if you feel like you need better for your life, maybe you should seek God. And when people are going through things, I ask them, do they want me to pray for them? This is the life that I live in private, that I also live in public. And because of that, not only is it because I'm exuding joy, but it's because I talk to people about God when they ask me. When they come to me, when we're having casual conversation, girl, I'm going to slide God in there. I'm going to tell you about the Lord now. If I don't tell you nothing else, I'm going to tell you about the Lord. Okay? And so because of that, people feel comfortable coming to me and asking me questions like, about church. And I'm not a person, though I've grown up in church and I've always been a church girl. Okay? Always. I'm not a person that I am seeking to condemn others, judge others, or feel like I need to tell them, no, you need to get in church or you're going to hell. Like, I'm not that type of person. I have never been that type of person. And so I find that people who are seeking God, who have never sought God, who was never even considering seeking God, who never even knew who God was, right? I find that these people are able to come to me and they're able to ask me these questions, and I don't always feel like I'm ready. I don't always feel like I'm going to know what to say when people walk up and ask me stuff like that. But when those people come up to me, it is God who speaks through me. And whatever message he has for that individual, he gets it through. Okay? And so these people are able to come to an individual who is standing in the space of people who don't look like me, who don't walk like me, who don't talk like me. And I'm talking about spiritual people. I'm talking about as it relates to God, right? I'm talking about people who are in the world, who are doing things of the world, and they feel comfortable coming to me, right? They feel like I can go to you. I can ask you these questions, right? Because here's the thing. I'm not trying to take over the room, but I'm also not diminishing who God is to me and who God is to them. And so because of that, God becomes the billboard before I say anything. My life is a billboard for who God is before I even open my mouth to say anything. right? And when we operate in this manner, instead of us trying to use God to win arguments, God uses us to win souls for the kingdom. Ooh, isn't that good though? Isn't that good? Like, how amazing it is to be used by God, right? And not have to weaponize scriptures or use God to try to win your argument. Because please, on the other hand, we have to also recognize when spaces are not conducive for us. We have to begin to understand and recognize when we are in spaces that we should no longer be in, right? And this is not being judgmental, because people will be quick to say that you are judging them when you don't want to do what they do, walk with where they walk, say what they say, go where they go, and all the things, right? People will be quick. You don't have to be a Christian for people to say you judging them. People use that word so loosely, and especially in today's time and age, like people use that word so loosely, right? The moment that you begin to pick up your discernment, the moment that you begin to understand what God is saying to you, convicting you of, and making you aware of, and you decide you don't want to do those things anymore, you don't want to live that life anymore, you don't want to walk that walk, there are going to be people who are going to say that you are judging them, right? And it doesn't mean that you are, right? And you don't have to let anybody convince you that you are, unless you know that you actually are. All right, then if you are, like, get it together, Bookie. But you don't have to feel like you are judging people. This is your discernment. This is the Lord maturing you. He is maturing you to get you to a different space and a place in your life, right? So this is your discernment. This is what you are picking up spiritually. Because we have to remember, Jesus went everywhere, but he did not stay everywhere. Okay? He walked all around. But Jesus did not stay everywhere. Sometimes Jesus like, got to perform a miracle here and there, but I got to go. I got to get up out of here after that. Okay? So balance means I don't have to prove my faith by surviving in spaces that are killing my spirit. Okay? Sometimes you got to know when to get up out of there. You don't have to stay everywhere long just because you're trying to prove that I love the Lord and I want to make sure I'm doing the Lord's work and the Lord's will and all of those things, and be in a space that is killing your spirit, or a place that God never intended for you to stay in, Bookie. If God didn't send you there, don't go. If God didn't tell you to stay, don't pack no bag. Okay? If God didn't tell you to go, don't catch no flight. Okay? Because here's the thing. When I'm talking about these spaces that aren't conducive, this doesn't always mean, oh, just these sinful places. Sometimes this means you don't have to go to the family reunion. Sometimes this means you don't have to go to the baby shower. Sometimes this means you don't have to go to the birthday party. Sometimes this means you don't have to go to the church event. I don't know what it means for you. I'm trying to be more clear on hearing God for myself, and not putting myself in spaces that I don't have to be in, because I feel like I have to be the walking example in a space that God never sent me to. So if God didn't send you, do not go, because it's only going to break you if it's not a place that God sent to make you. Oh, I kind of like that. I kind of like that. So how do we know when we are going from being in the balance of things to falling into compromise? We know because our acceptance becomes louder than our obedience. And it is actually rare that us falling into compromise, or that compromise itself, is actually like loud. It's rare that when we are in a compromising state that we are loud. Actually, we tend to get very quiet. We tend to get very quiet. We get to we get on a shush mode, right? Because when we are falling into compromise, that means we are beginning to accept anything. Anything goes. We are laughing about things that once used to bother us. We are staying silent when conviction is showing up. And we're saying it's not that deep. We begin to say it's not that deep when it really is. Because here's the thing. And it's not that deep announcement. It's like when we say it's easier said than done. It's an excuse that we make not to do something, right? Easier said than done means it's an excuse not to accept something or not to deal with something. So when we say it's not that deep, it really is. It's like the same as someone saying, I'm unbothered. Well, the fact that you had to make an announcement to tell me that you're unbothered means you are very much bothered, right? So the fact that we feel that we have to make an announcement that it's not that deep means it very much is so that deep. And we're trying to take back the blow or the push of the attachments of conviction, of the repercussions, of the consequences of us reaping what we have sown. We are trying to push back on that. We are trying to deny that. Denial is a river in Egypt. Okay, we are trying to deny that or not deal with the conviction that the Lord is sending. And then we begin to lose our identity because we are seeking to belong in spaces that don't foster who we are or who we've been called to be. And this is where many of us get stuck, right? Because compromising isn't just a change in your behavior. It is a blur of the reflection. So when you look in the mirror, you start not to recognize not only who you are, but you start not to recognize who you're becoming. Because now you're no longer on the path that you were. You're no longer on the journey with God that you were. So you start not to recognize who this person is that you're becoming because you have adopted things. You have went with the crowd when you knew things were wrong or dangerous for you. And now you are in a space when you don't recognize this person you're looking at. And now you are at the stage of your life where it is no longer about the reverence for God, but it's more about glorifying people. And so we no longer ask what honors God. Instead, we ask, if I do this or if I do that, what friendships, what relationships, what people, who am I going to lose along the way? And this is exactly what compromise is. Compromise is choosing people over God time and time again, so often that God's voice becomes quieter to us. And it's not because God is actually quieter or wasn't speaking, because there are times in our lives when God isn't speaking. There are seasons of our lives that we will go through where God isn't speaking, but we are seeking God, right? And he's intentionally silent. But there's times in our lives when we are in the throes of compromise and God has been speaking, or he's speaking the whole time, but we can't hear God because we turn up the volume of other people and turn down the volume of God. So now all we hear are the voices of other people while God is continuously trying to get through to us because he's not going to force himself on us, right? But we turn the volume down on God's voice and we turn the volume up on other people. And what we have to realize is that God loves people deeply. He loves us all deeply, but not more than the truth. And in fact, truth is a part of love. So this means that we can love people without betraying God. And honoring God does not mean that we have to abandon people. That's the balance. So yes, you can walk with God and still belong. Belonging comes from God first. And when you belong to him, you're no longer desperate to fit in everywhere. So maybe this walk isn't about figuring out how close we can get to the line. Maybe it's more about how rooted we can be in God while standing in a world full of people he loves.
This has been Between Me and Thee. Be sure to let your light shine and join the conversation on Instagram or YouTube. Until next time.